Hello Nigerians, this is Jazini Insights, where we talk about political issues as it affects the country Nigeria. In recent times, it's in public notice that Nigeria went into an election where they want to elect leaders, and it's obvious that young people in Nigeria have lost hope in the country, and this time around they decided that they want to make a change by the ballots, as they have always been challenged. Nigeria is a country that is harboring almost about 250 million people, and with an overwhelming evidence of poverty, of bad governance, and overwhelming corruption. I want to tell you 7 moral reasons why Peter Obi should be declared the president of Nigeria. In search of good governance, there were about 4 major candidates in the election: Tinubu of the APC, Atiku of the PDP, Peter Obi of the Labour Party, and Kwankwaso of the NNPP. There were other candidates, as about 18 political parties registered their presence in this year's election. But these 4 that I mentioned earlier stood out because of their prominence, antecedents, and promises to the Nigerian people. Out of them, it was a heated campaign. It was hopes, heightened hopes. And in that election, Nigerians spoke. What was obvious before the election was that Peter Obi of the Labour Party seemed to be a rallying point for young Nigerians who either have not voted before now or have lost faith in the system and feel that their votes cannot count. This time around, due to pains in their hearts, they stood up and felt they can make the needed changes. How were these changes going to come about, and what changed their original view about electioneering in Nigeria? The umpire and the body that is in charge of conducting these elections, known as INEC, made a huge promise. The country allocated huge sums of money to these projects.
The chairman of the commission says technological devices will be deployed to improve the conduct.
Most Nigerians are more familiar with the bimodal voter accreditation system, the BVAS, which doubles as accreditation device as well as the upload of polling unit level result sheets on election day on or to the INEC result viewing portal, the IREV, in real time. These innovations have increased transparency and public confidence in the electoral process. They are also part of the legal requirements for conducting elections in Nigeria.
The hopes were high, technology was involved, the BVAS and the IREV were going to be the game changers. And then, once again, Nigerians had the hope that things will be done the right way this time around, and that it's worth it to risk their lives to go all out for that election. In the preceding events, they voted massively for Peter Obi of the Labour Party. But, there were those who felt they were masters in the act. Example was the Tinubu Bola Ahmed of the APC, Atiku Waziri of the PDP, against the other 2 that I mentioned earlier. There were evidences that they made efforts to compromise the election to their favor. Before this time, there were voice notes to the efforts to rig the election by the PDP. And there were braggings by the APC to know who will finally occupy the highest position in the land. But unfortunately, to their dismay, the young movements of Nigerians who have called themselves obedient and believed in the leadership of Peter Obi based on his antecedents gave them a shocker. That movement was said to be 4 people tweeting in a room. He moved from state to state and covered what was more than the NSAS popularity, simply because young Nigerians wanted to, for once, have somebody they elected by themselves as their president. What happens in secrecy, INEC declares Ahmed Bola Tinubu of the APC the president.
Tinubu Bola Ahmed of the APC, having satisfied the requirements of the law, is hereby declared the winner and is returned elected. Thank you.
It was more like a matter of let's just get him declared and you go to the courts to battle it out. Unfortunately, Nigerians have always been left to the mercy of the legal system, which is also, your guess is as good as mine. Having looked at this case critically, I came to 7 conclusions about why we should declare Peter Obi of the Labour Party the winner of this election. Number 1, he won the election. Somebody will ask me whether I can prove this. Just go to the streets of Nigeria. Check the mood of the nation. The mood of the nation tells you that the people's mandates have been stolen and they are not happy about it. For once in our history, Nigeria won and finished an election and no person is openly celebrating that election. It has become the caption of most media houses how shambolic the Nigerian elections was. It has also been the topic of this discourse over the days preceding the elections. Most of the clips got from that election from the Beavers, which was supposed to be part of the game changer, proved that Peter Obi of the Labour Party had majority of the votes. Though most of the analysis have not been finished because the highest court in the land asks that the INEC opens its doors to the party to prove its case. But little of the information that have been gathered shows that votes belonging to Peter Obi were switched to the candidates of the APC.
So when you suddenly see people screaming that all that was done was that the 2 numbers were switched, APC's tiny votes given to Labour and Labour's tiny votes, Labour's huge votes given to APC. So the whole thing balances. So again, I'm just presenting information. I saw it on INEC. I looked at the information. It looked like it had been altered. So that's what I'm saying.
We do not need soothsayers to tell us that Obi won that election. That is if we are still in a country with a conscience and with people who are ready to say the truth. One will also argue that if you do not trust that those were really Peter Obi's votes, that the whole shambolic process should be stood down or cancelled and another one repeated. There were irregularities. People died for this election. Ballot boxes belonging to Peter Obi or votes belonging to Peter Obi were seen scattered all over the streets and in polling units, some in the forest, some in offices. There were intimidations of voters that are open in public domain, like this one.
If you don't even vote APC for a year, go your house. Nobody force you down there. Go house. So if I see you vote another, I will call Luca. If I see you vote another party, go ahead and ask. No control for you. This territory where you dey, na APC. Go your house. Go relax.
Don't cry, madam. Don't cry, madam. Don't cry. Even with blood dripping on your face, dripping from your face, you're still voting.
INEC modalities were flouted blatantly by the same organization that put the rules. INEC also have been very complicit in defending the shams it packaged for Nigerians and to the world. The election has been heavily criticized internally and externally, much more than other elections in our history. Heavily mutilated election results uploaded in the IREV. No one would not say that if you have to do with numbers that should be on paper, they should be eligible and as clear, as convincing than what we see in the INEC. portals. An average Nigerian covers his face in shame. An average Nigerian has been traumatized emotionally in recent times. An average Nigerian is not happy. There were financial issues within the season of this election, deliberate attempts to disenfranchise Nigerians. Nigerians had no access to money. Getting themselves to the election venues were difficult. But even in all these difficulties, they wanted a change. And that was the driving force for trooping to the streets to vote their own candidates. The second reason Peter Obi should be declared the president of Nigeria is that he is a unifying factor. There is no doubt that most political parties rode on these assertions that they are unifiers, but it wasn't in reality. Peter Obi never made those assertions, but they were evident in what happened. Before the elections, Nigerians rallied around him, financed his campaigns, inconvenienced themselves to identify with Peter Obi. He was massively loved. These are clips of some of the happenings before the elections during the campaigns.
It's a huge crowd of supporters, mainly young people, who have come out in their numbers to rally support for the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi, and his running mate, Dati Baba Ahmed. The participants say they are sending a strong message to those who believe that the Labour Party candidate has no political structure to win the elections in 2023.
You can see with your eyes that it's not about structure. The people are the structure. So we have come to let them know that we are taking it from their hand.
Music in its full blare, the group marched through the streets, displaying the Labour Party flags and placards with messages relating to the 2023 general elections. Participants here strongly believe that they are bringing what some people have termed a social media movement to reality.
They've been saying it's a social media movement, and now we are here. Let them come down here and see us and see if we are still on social media.
Look around. What are you seeing here? Is this social media? No. These are human beings. We are the structure. This human being is the structure. But is it just a simple sentence? Let's go to the field. Then they will see the answer. 2023.
Everywhere is under siege of terrorism, banditry, kidnapping. We want to be free from these things. And we have seen hope in P2B. So we are marching for our freedom, campaigning for our redemption.
That is a man that is loved by his people. In the history of Nigeria's election, we have not seen a man that is so loved across ethnic lines, across religious lines. A rallying point for Nigerians. The only time we came close to something like that is when there was World Cup games, or the FIFA World Cup games, or Nigeria hosted any games that is football, or we're going to play in the football. At such times, Nigerians never knew their tribe. They never knew whether they were Christians. All they knew was to lift the flag of their own country in victory. And they were united in that purpose. But we saw in this time that Peter Obi played more than that role. Liked by the Muslims, liked by the Christians, liked by all the regions of this country. Even though other political parties capitalized in destroying this feature that Peter Obi enjoyed by whipping up ethno-religious sentiments like the ones we see by Reno Omokri of the PDP, FFK Fani Kayode of the APC. This time around, Nigerians got to know who the real enemies were. They were those politicians who never cared about the peace of a country that is carrying a lot of load, bordering on religion, ethnicity, that has been fueled by a civil war after independence. That war was also based on disenfranchisement. They never cared. Most times when it is not in their favor, they brought up statements that ordinary Nigerians and volatile Nigerians stood upon, and violence keeps going. But the man Peter Obi never campaigned on those grounds. Of course, Peter Obi is an Igbo man, a tribe that has been mentally and physically tormented in the union of a Nigerian state. If you do not know, Nigeria is made up of more than 250 ethnic languages and groups. Most of these groups cry of marginalization and neglect, and the Igbos are the major of these groups crying for marginalization. Wherever they found themselves, they have been traumatized one way or the other because of the Cold War between the Nigerian states and the Igbo faction of the country due to the civil or the Biafran War that was also caused by the same complaints of marginalization. If we cared enough about the issues dividing us, one would think that instead of further putting these divisions, it will be looked into. Fortunately, Peter Obi happened to be an Igbo man, or happened to be a politician of Igbo extraction. Tell me, who denies his roots? No one. And out of most of the things we cannot choose in life, we do not choose where we come from. We find ourselves there. Peter Obi happened to find himself in the Igbo faction of Nigeria, and that is his greatest crime. Peter Obi is also supposed to be a Christian. Nigeria is a country that shares almost 50-50 of the two major religious groups, the Christians and the Muslims. And we have lived together that way for many years. But like I said earlier, the politicians cash into these differences and divide us the more. But now the younger generations are wiser and know who the real enemies are. We thought we were our own problems, but we never knew that there were few people who put their hands on our differences just to get what they want and abandon us much later. Like I said, Peter Obi is a Christian of the Nigerian population. During the campaigns for True, he visited religious organizations. People will say, where was he doing that before the elections? People would also ask if he's going to continue that after the election. Of course, you know the answers. He is a man on a mission looking for something. You go all out and work for what you need. Peter Obi worked for what he wanted. Peter Obi also built bridges across religious lines. He was in northern part of Nigeria. He met many Muslim leaders who also endorsed him because of his plan and project for the country called Nigeria. As far as I know, Muslims are not stereotypes. There are people who are lovely. They are leaders, imams, and religious leaders who have the people at heart. They welcomed the new development and the cry of Nigerians for a change. They cared about the needs of their people, and they went all out to see who can do that. I tell you that if in the Muslim tradition it was allowed to come into their religious gatherings to sell your plans, Peter Obi would have also been there. This is a man that never sowed discrimination during the campaigns. Despite the way it was thrown at him, they tried to drag him into that, and he remained resolute as a Nigerian who wanted the best for his country, who understood the need of the hour. Let us also not assume that religion removes reasoning from us. In fact, religion has formed the basis of our conscience, the builder of the human being in us. Whether you are Christian, you are Muslim, it doesn't remove the sensibilities in you. In fact, one would say that most of the things we have imbibed as religion, no matter our affiliations, have been sold to us, taught us by our parents, and handed down the ages, not leaving out the possibilities of adulteration, of exaggerations, of sentiments, and more. So when we talk about religion, let us not see it as something that controls us without our knowing. Sometimes I wonder if God is actually not weeping over how we have taken this religion to mean all the insensibilities we exhibit. Number 3, morality and integrity. What if I told you that growing up, I was taught to be moral and to have integrity? I was also expected to hand down those values to my children. A leader was and is still mandated to be morally okay, morally good. In fact, in my social science, I was always asked to list the qualities of a good leader, and that came very handy as number 1. Peter Obi is a man with integrity, a man that is clean, at least with what the eyes can see and the standards of man. It is true that we are not God, but we can actually not be God, and God's standards will be much more perfect than ours. But judging by what the eye sees, this is a man with antecedents that are verifiable. Therefore, a leader is expected not to carry baggages and corruption issues. So good morals remains a standard for leadership roles. A leader must be a shining example void of baggages and corruption indictments. Peter Obi meets these requirements compared with all other contestants in this 2023 general elections. General acceptance. Peter Obi is a man that has been generally accepted, at least to a greater extent in Nigeria, compared with every other candidate in this election. What else are we looking for? This is the most requirement in an election because it reflects the people's will, which we say we want to get through the ballots. Nigerians love Peter Obi and they are proud to identify with him as their leader, something that has not happened in a very long time in Nigeria, where there is a widening gap between the leaders and the led. I think personally that this attribute is very important both for the leader and the led. Where you see someone as not worth being your leader, it is very dangerous. Or those people lead you by force, it is also very dangerous. It will keep widening the security issues we have in the country. The issue of parallel governments, where people never accept that whoever is in power is their leader, and they make other alternative efforts to undermine that leadership. This is certainly what no government or any country wants. Our young people and well-meaning Nigerians have rallied around Peter Obi, and for once there is this hope coming back to Nigeria, a country where its people have never felt like they belong there, where they feel ashamed to be called Nigerians because of the profiling they see by international communities due to the records that their leaders have had in time past. The brain drain, where our professionals leave the country because they've lost faith in the country. The Japa syndrome, where Nigerians feel it is no longer home and they risk death in the Mediterranean Sea, in the deserts, and through the horrors of leaving the country by hook or crook. Most of them sell their living in millions to Japa, which means to elope and run away from the country. That Japa syndrome seems to be dropping with the personality and the candidacy of Peter Obi. Hope is coming back. People now are beginning to believe in their country, that this man is able to begin to redirect the country in the right direction, and they are ready to follow. It is important to have a leadership that the people think they can follow. The mental torture that Nigerians go through for carrying the green passport is not something they want to continue with, and they feel the man Peter Obi can help to change that story. Let's talk about Nigeria's perception in the Committee of Nations. Since the conclusion of that 25th general elections, Nigerians have made headlines with captions like "a frail leader once takes over Buhari," "a former drug lord," or whatever emerges as Nigeria's president. Whatever the caption you have come across, that will keep defining Nigeria in the Committee of Nations, where we will no longer be regarded as people that value morals, integrity, good leadership, the adherence to the rule of law. And this has a way of telling negatively on the treatments we receive from other countries, even the support we receive, where our judiciary is no longer valued. Recently, I met someone. She asked me where I am from because we were to carry out a project together somewhere. She asked me where I am from. I said, I'm from Africa. And she said, which country in Africa? I said, Nigeria. She said, I don't know much about Nigeria because I had to go ahead to ask her what she knows about Nigeria. She said, but recently I got to know because of their just concluded elections. Guess what? It hurts me badly to know that the only thing that brought her to the knowledge of Nigeria was a shambolic election which she referenced. She described how Nigerians in Amsterdam, in Rotterdam and other parts of especially the Amsterdam where she stays, how Nigerians there felt. I wondered how she gathered her information, but that was the thing she threw at me and told me to explain further. I was caught up between projecting my country positively and actually saying the truth of what happened. You know how traumatizing it can be. It looks like Africa is one continent that can never get it right. Does it mean that we have lost men of goodwill, good conscience, integrity in Africa? No. Nigeria, Africa, is servicing the world in most ways you can think of, positive ways at that. And internally, we can no longer continue to do business as usual. It's time that the pains in the hearts of Nigerians be addressed. The trauma they face for carrying the green passports be addressed. The perception that we can never do the right things has to change. Let's talk about law and the rule of law. Let us not think that law removes common sense from us. As an undergraduate in the university, I was made to go through philosophy and logic, common sense, reasoning, and matching those reasoning with what's on ground. It is never a separate part of the legal system, where people have come to believe that legality supersedes legitimacy. It is dangerous. Hear it from this elder statesman in this interview. Watch it.
People do not understand the importance of legitimacy over legality. If you win an election and the election is rigged all over, yes, you won legally, but you are not a legitimate choice of the people. In fact, that was what Jimmy Carter was saying when he came for the 1999 election in which General Obasanjo won. And his group saw so many this thing, which he complained about at that time. To him, the election was illegitimate. But in Nigeria, we don't understand the difference. We don't understand the difference. Some people do, but those people just keep quiet. And therefore, you could see the trend in our system, okay, that every time we talk about legal, but we don't talk about legitimacy. And I believe at that particular time, there was no need for anybody in his logical and consequential belief to say that there's a need for general baptist school. There was no need at all for anybody to come in at that time. We should have taken that historic election because it was not only legal but also legitimate. That was the point. And you had a situation in which two Muslim gentlemen were contesting the election. And the election all over Nigeria because of Chief Abela's popularity.
Legality or the law is not only built on technicalities and evidences, as people will always tell us to go and prove that Obi won the election. And as has also proven in most of the cases the judiciary handled in recent times, the Osun elections and the Lawand case in the North Central, where an aspirant in the same election played dual roles and vied for two positions, and the court upheld it on the grounds of technicality. If the technicalities are flawed, can they not be changed? Can the process not be cancelled? Those days I grew up as a child knowing that the court cancelled the whole process and told them to go back through it or forget it if the technicalities were not okay or followed, and not that the next person becomes the winner because the technicalities were not followed. So if the litigant doesn't follow the technicalities, does it make the next person right either? These are questions that the judiciary in Nigeria makes us answer always. And I don't think it's all the judiciary. I also feel that is the compromised part of the judiciary that these same people who feel they can buy up Nigeria has been able to capture. I want to believe there are men of goodwill in the country that still believes that right is right, white is white, no matter the background it is placed. If we really have to bank on laws, legality, and the rule of law, INEC should have been the first person answering at this point. There should have been arrests made because they not only disappointed Nigerians by flouting the electoral laws, they also broke their own rules. It's like FIFA making rules for a World Cup and coming to the World Cup and blatantly throwing it on the face of the whole world that they are no longer playing by those rules just because they wanted to favor a country. What do you think? The only thing INEC built these elections on, it jettisoned it at the very last moment when we expected their last presentation. This was the scenario in the Iwu's INEC leadership time, when a particular word or its translation became the determinant of a whole election. Our judiciary can do better by upholding the rule of law in a country housing more than 230 million people. Are Nigerians being taken as fools? We have people with good reasoning faculty. We've been traumatized in our own country by people who do not care what we feel so long as they can push their way through on illegality. Remember, legality should not be the only thing. Legitimacy should. Insecurity and brewing tension. Before the elections, every region of the country was bewildered by security concerns. Boko Haram in the far north, unknown gunmen in the south, kidnappings and ritual killings in the southwest, farmer header crisis in some parts of the north. You can count them. Our government has been overwhelmed by these insecurities. And since the emergence of Peter Obi, and because of the unity he spells, these things have stood down. And most recently, there were agitations in the southeast over a people who nobody needs to tell that they are not accepted in a country they call their own. Biafra agitations grew. Though there are people who cashed into that agitation to exhibit criminality, but the true Biafran person sought for a country where he could belong. The same marginalization they scream of was kind of tempered by the emergence of a man from their region in this election to tell you that their concerns were legitimate. They said, okay, if we are going to be considered this time around, let's play a part in these elections. And yet again, Nigeria deprived these people who massively voted for their brother, though that wasn't the focus of their franchise, just because for once they wanted to believe in a together Nigeria. All this fueled the insecurity in the country. If we mean well for ourselves, couldn't we have also considered that this man won the election not just by sentiment, but by merit, and that the insecurity in the country can be well fought and conquered by a Peter Obi candidacy? The youths of Nigeria were ready to troop into the streets and risk their lives to agitate over the disenfranchisement of the Nigerian people and the deprivation of Peter Obi. But it is this same man, Peter Obi, that has constantly appealed to them to stand down. If we have a candidate that for once our people will be happy to listen to, don't we think it will go a long way in helping a fragile Nigerian state? Do we really want to tell ourselves the truth? What about accountability? INEC should be accountable to Nigerians. If an umpire, somebody or people we have placed our faiths in, cannot tell us how it all went, then what are we here for? And when next can we believe them? In saner countries, people would have been arrested